Chapter 22. How Saint Anne complied with the law of Moses in regard to childbirth, and how Most Holy Mary acted in her infancy. It was a precept of the law given in the 12th chapter of Leviticus that a woman who had given birth to a daughter should be deemed impure for 2 weeks and should remain in the state of purification for 66 days after the birth, just double the time required for purification in case of a man-child. Having completed the days of her purification, she was to present herself in order to offer a lamb 1 year old as a holocaust for the daughter or the son, and also a young pigeon or turtle dove as atonement for the sin. This she was to do at the door of the tabernacle, beseeching the priest to offer them to the Lord and to pray for her. Thereupon she was accounted pure. The parturition of the most happy Anne was pure and undefiled, as befitting her heavenly daughter, in whose purity the mother was a sharer. Although on this account there was no need of a special purification, she nevertheless complied with the obligation of the law to the very last point. Though not subject to its penalties, she considered herself bound in the eyes of men. 60 days of the purification having passed, Saint Anne departed for the temple, her mind inflamed with divine ardor, and bearing in her arms her blessed daughter and child. With the offerings prescribed by law and accompanied by innumerable angels, she betook herself to the gate of the temple and spoke with the high priest, who was none other than Simeon. He was accustomed to spend much time in the temple and enjoy the privilege and favor of seeing the child Mary, not only when she was offered and presented to the Lord in the temple, but on other occasions. Although this holy priest was not on each of these occasions fully aware of the dignity of our heavenly mistress, as I will say farther on, yet he always experienced great promptings and impulses of the Spirit regarding the greatness of this child in the sight of God. Saint Anne offered to him the lamb and the turtle dove with the rest of the gifts, and with tears of humility she asked him to pray for herself and the child, her daughter, that the Lord forgive them any fault of which perhaps they might be guilty. His Majesty certainly had nothing to forgive in a daughter and mother who were so full of grace, but he found himself bound to reward the humility with which, notwithstanding their holiness, they presented themselves as sinners. The holy priest received the oblation, and in his spirit he was inflamed and moved to extraordinary joy. Careful not to manifest anything exteriorly, and communing with himself, he said, "What strange feeling is this within me? Are these women perhaps the parents of the Messiah who is to come?" Moved by this joyful suspense, he showed them great benevolence. The Blessed Mother Anne entered the temple, bearing her most holy daughter on her arms, and she offered her to the Lord with most devout and tender tears. For she alone in all the world knew what treasure was given into her charge. Saint Anne renewed the vow which she had already made to offer her firstborn to the temple on arriving at the proper age. In renewing this offer, she was enlightened by new graces and promptings of the Most High, and in her heart she heard a secret voice urging her to fulfill this vow and offer her child to the temple within 3 years. It was, as it were, the echo of the voice of the Most Holy Queen, who, in her prayer, touched the heart of God, in order that it might resound in the bosom of the mother. For when both entered the temple, the sweet child, seeing with her bodily eyes its grandeur and magnificence, dedicated to the worship and adoration of the divinity, experienced wonderful effects of the Spirit, and wished to prostrate herself in the temple, to kiss its floor and adore the Lord. But as she could not execute these desires in external actions, she supplied the defect with interior fervor, and she adored and blessed the Lord with a love more ardent and a humility more profound than ever before or ever after was possible to be rendered by any creature. Addressing the Lord in her heart, she offered the following prayer.